The cameras were rolling. The audience was silent. And in Dr. Phil's hand was a single white envelope that could change everything. But when he asked the question everyone had been waiting for, the man sitting across from him did something no one expected. He said no. And in that moment, Dr. Phil did something he had never done in over 2 decades on television. He stopped the tape. This is the story of how one refusal on live TV exposed a family secret so deep, it would take everything Dr. Phil had to bring the truth to light. It started 3 weeks earlier when a 28-year-old woman named Sarah sent an email to the Dr. Phil show. The subject line read, "My daughter deserves to know who her father is." Inside was a story that had haunted her for 7 years. A story about a man named Michael, a brief relationship, and a little girl named Emma who had never met the man Sarah claimed was her dad. Michael had always denied it. He said the timeline didn't match. He said Sarah had been seeing other people. He said he wasn't ready to be a father back then, and he certainly wasn't going to claim a child that might not even be his. For 7 years, he refused every request for a DNA test. For 7 years, Emma grew up without knowing the truth. Sarah's email was raw and desperate. She wasn't asking for money. She wasn't asking for a relationship. She was asking for one thing, certainty. And she believed that if anyone could get Michael to finally take that test, it was Dr. Phil. The Dr. Phil team reached out to Michael. After weeks of back and forth, he finally agreed to appear on the show. But he made one thing clear: he was coming to prove Sarah wrong, not to take a test. The morning of the taping, Dr. Phil sat in his dressing room reviewing the case file. Something didn't add up. Michael's refusal wasn't just about doubt. It was about fear. And Dr. Phil knew that fear like that only came from one place: the truth. The studio filled with audience members. Sarah arrived early, her hands shaking as she walked through the backstage hallways. Emma, now 7 years old, was not in the studio. Sarah had made that decision carefully. This wasn't a moment for a child to witness. This was a moment for adults to finally face what they'd been running from. Michael arrived 20 minutes before taping. He didn't make eye contact with Sarah. He sat in the green room, arms crossed, jaw tight. A producer asked if he needed anything. He shook his head. He was ready to get this over with. Dr. Phil walked onto the stage to applause. The audience had no idea what they were about to witness. He greeted them with his usual warmth, but there was something different in his eyes today. He had done thousands of shows. He had mediated countless family disputes. But today felt different. Today, someone was going to have to face a truth they'd spent years avoiding. Today, Dr. Phil began, we're talking about something that affects millions of families across this country. Paternity. Identity. And the right of a child to know where they come from. He paused, letting the weight of those words settle. I want to introduce you to Sarah. Sarah walked onto the stage. She was nervous, but she held her head high. She sat down, and Dr. Phil gave her a reassuring nod. They talked for a few minutes. She told her story. She described the relationship with Michael, the pregnancy, the denial, the years of silence. Her voice cracked when she talked about Emma asking why she didn't have a dad like the other kids at school. The audience was silent. Some wiped their eyes. Then Dr. Phil said, "Let's bring out Michael." Michael walked onto the stage. He didn't look at Sarah. He sat down in the chair across from Dr. Phil, his body language closed off, defensive. Dr. Phil studied him for a moment before speaking. "Michael, thank you for being here," Dr. Phil said. His tone was calm, but there was an edge to it. "I know this isn't easy. I'm here to set the record straight," Michael replied. "I'm not Emma's father. I've said it for 7 years, and I'll say it again today." Dr. Phil leaned forward. "Then why not take the test? If you're so sure, why not just take the test and put this to rest once and for all?" Michael shifted in his seat. "Because I don't need to. I know the truth. I don't owe anyone anything." The audience murmured. Sarah's face fell. Dr. Phil didn't move. He just watched Michael, reading every micro-expression, every defensive gesture. "Michael," Dr. Phil said slowly, "do you understand what you're doing to that little girl? She's 7 years old. She didn't ask to be born into this situation. She didn't ask for any of this. But she's living with it every single day." Michael's jaw clenched. "That's not my problem." And that's when it happened. Dr. Phil stood up. He turned to the camera operator and said 2 words that stunned everyone in the room. "Stop the tape." The cameras stopped rolling. The studio went completely silent. Audience members looked at each other in confusion. Sarah's eyes widened. Michael looked up, startled. Dr. Phil walked over to the edge of the stage and motioned to one of the producers. He spoke quietly, but his voice carried enough authority that no one dared interrupt. Then he turned back to Michael. "Michael," Dr. Phil said, his voice no longer calm, no longer diplomatic. "I've been doing this for over 20 years. I've sat across from murderers, abusers, addicts, and liars. And I can tell you right now you're scared. You're not refusing this test because you think you're not the father. You're refusing it because you know you are." Michael's face turned red. "You don't know what you're talking about. Don't I?" Dr. Phil stepped closer. "Let me tell you what I see. I see a man who walked away from a relationship because it got complicated. I see a man who convinced himself that if he just denied it long enough, it would go away. But it didn't go away, did it? Because that little girl is real. She's out there. And every day you refuse to take responsibility, you're telling her she doesn't matter." The audience was frozen. Sarah had tears streaming down her face. Dr. Phil reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a white envelope. He held it up. "This," he said, "is a DNA test kit. It takes 5 minutes. A simple cheek swab. And in 2 weeks, we'll have an answer that ends this once and for all." He extended the envelope toward Michael. "So I'm going to ask you one more time. Will you take this test?" Michael stared at the envelope. His hands were shaking. The room was so quiet you could hear the air conditioning hum. "No," Michael said, his voice barely above a whisper. Dr. Phil didn't lower the envelope. He just stood there, holding it, waiting. "Why not?" Dr. Phil asked, his voice softer now, almost gentle. "What are you so afraid of?" And then, something broke. Michael's face crumbled. His tough exterior shattered in an instant. He put his head in his hands. "Because," Michael said, his voice shaking, "if I take that test and it says I'm her father, then I have to deal with the fact that I abandoned my own kid for 7 years. And I don't know if I can live with that." The audience gasped. Sarah let out a sob. Dr. Phil set the envelope down on the table between them and sat back down. "Michael," Dr. Phil said quietly, "that guilt you're feeling right now, that's your conscience telling you the truth. You already know. You've always known. Subscribe and leave a comment, because the most powerful part of this story is still ahead." Michael wiped his eyes. For the first time since he walked onto that stage, he looked at Sarah. Really looked at her. And in that moment, something shifted. "I'm sorry," Michael whispered. "I'm so sorry." Sarah nodded, unable to speak. Dr. Phil picked up the envelope again. "Michael, taking this test doesn't erase the past. But it gives Emma a future. It gives her the truth. And it gives you a chance to do the right thing, starting today." Michael reached out and took the envelope. The audience erupted in applause. Sarah covered her face with her hands, sobbing. Dr. Phil placed a hand on Michael's shoulder. "This is the first step," Dr. Phil said. "But it's the most important one." Off camera, Dr. Phil made a decision. He called his team together during the commercial break and told them to arrange for immediate counseling resources for both Sarah and Michael. He contacted a family therapist who specialized in paternity cases. He made sure that when those test results came back, both of them would have support, no matter what the outcome was. 2 weeks later, the results came back. Dr. Phil called both Sarah and Michael into his office separately before they returned to the show for the reveal. He wanted to prepare them. He wanted to make sure they understood the weight of what was about to happen. When they returned to the stage, Dr. Phil held a second envelope. This one contained the results. "Before I open this," Dr. Phil said, "I want both of you to understand something. Whatever this paper says, Emma is the priority. She's the one who matters most in all of this. And both of you need to commit, right here, right now, that you're going to do what's best for her. Can you do that?" Sarah nodded immediately. Michael hesitated, then nodded as well. Dr. Phil opened the envelope. He read the results silently. Then he looked up at Michael. "You are the father," Dr. Phil said. Michael closed his eyes. Sarah let out a breath she'd been holding for 7 years. Dr. Phil didn't give them time to process. He leaned forward. "Michael, you have a daughter. And she's been waiting 7 years to know who you are. What are you going to do about it?" Michael looked up, tears in his eyes. "I want to meet her. I want to be her dad." But what happened next is something no one in the room, or watching at home, saw coming. Dr. Phil stood up and walked off stage. The cameras followed him. He went backstage, into a small room where a little girl was sitting with a child psychologist. Emma. She was coloring, unaware of what was happening just a few hundred feet away. Dr. Phil knelt down beside her. "Emma," he said gently, "there's someone I'd like you to meet." Emma looked up, curious but cautious. Dr. Phil extended his hand. She took it. He walked her onto the stage. The audience saw her first and fell completely silent. Sarah stood up, tears streaming down her face. Michael stood frozen, staring at the little girl who had his eyes, his nose, his smile. Dr. Phil guided Emma to stand in front of Michael. He knelt down beside her again. "Emma, this is Michael. And Michael, this is your daughter." Michael dropped to his knees. He looked at Emma, and for the first time in 7 years, he saw himself in her. He saw the truth he'd been running from. And he saw the chance he'd almost lost forever. "Hi, Emma," Michael said, his voice breaking. Emma looked at him, then at Dr. Phil, then back at Michael. "Are you my dad?" she asked. Michael nodded, unable to speak. Emma thought about it for a moment. Then she said, "Okay." And she smiled. The audience lost it. People were standing, clapping, crying. Sarah was sobbing. Dr. Phil stepped back, letting the moment belong to them. Michael reached into his pocket and pulled out a small bracelet. It was simple, just a silver chain with a single charm, a heart. He had bought it that morning, just in case. Just in case this moment happened. "I got this for you," Michael said, holding it out to Emma. If you want it." Emma took the bracelet and looked at it. Then she looked up at Michael. "Can you put it on me?" she asked. Michael's hands shook as he fastened the bracelet around her tiny wrist. And in that moment, a family that had been broken for 7 years began to heal. Dr. Phil didn't need to say anything else. He didn't need to deliver a monologue or offer advice. The moment spoke for itself. After the show, Dr. Phil arranged for Michael and Sarah to meet with a co-parenting counselor. He set up therapy sessions for Emma to help her process everything. He made sure they had the resources they needed to build a relationship that put Emma first. Months later, Dr. Phil received a letter. It was from Sarah. Inside was a photo of Emma, smiling, wearing the bracelet Michael had given her. And beside her was Michael, his arm around her shoulder, finally stepping into the role he should have taken 7 years ago. The letter said, "Thank you for not letting him walk away. Thank you for making him see what I couldn't make him see. You gave my daughter her father back." Dr. Phil kept that photo on his desk. Not because it was a victory, but because it was a reminder. A reminder that sometimes, the hardest thing someone can do is face the truth. And sometimes, all they need is someone who refuses to let them run from it. The white envelope that started it all sits in Dr. Phil's archive now, a symbol of the moment when one man's refusal became his redemption. When a little girl's question, "Are you my dad?" finally got the answer she deserved. Share and subscribe. Make sure this story is never forgotten. Because sometimes, stopping everything is the only way to start healing.